Welcome to Troo Talk, your go-to podcast for navigating the complex world of business energy. I'm your host, Hannah. In this episode, we will be delving into the realm of sustainable energy solutions, specifically focusing on the solar initiatives for the manufacturing sector. As the manufacturing sector contends with high energy rates and increasing legislation from government initiatives such as the Climate Change Levy, reducing cost, consumption, and carbon footprint is essential and is becoming a critical priority. Now more than ever, it is essential to understand and implement more sustainable energy solutions to address these ongoing challenges. Joining me today is David Lewington from Nexus Europe. Together, we'll unravel the intricacies of seamlessly integrating solar technologies into industrial settings. Incorporating sustainable energy sources into your business not only reduces your carbon footprint, but it also strengthens your operational resilience. Join us for a comprehensive exploration of the sustainable energy landscape, where industry meets innovation. So, David, I just want to start off with saying thank you for coming on today.
My pleasure.
And I was just wondering if you could provide an overview of solar solutions and their benefits for the manufacturing sector.
Yes, absolutely. I'm delighted to. And thank you very much for inviting me here today. It's really nice to talk to you and your audience. So yeah, there's many benefits really. And I think over the last few years, probably even in particular the last year, with energy prices becoming so expensive, it's really become an important issue for boards and companies to consider how they reduce their costs ongoing. On top of that, you've got a lot of environmental pressures. You've got a customer base that's becoming more aware of your carbon footprint as a company. And by installing solar panels and other renewable technologies, you can start to control those uncontrollables at the moment. So the costs that your business is paying for energy, your carbon footprint, and improving the relationship that you've got with your customers. Those would be probably the main benefits that I would see today.
Okay, so that brings me on to my next question. How have advancements in solar technology made it more accessible and cost effective for manufacturers?
Probably the biggest thing for manufacturers is that the efficiency of the panels, the products themselves, over the last sort of 15 years have become far more efficient. They're a robust product that once they're installed, there really isn't much maintenance that's required with them at all. And the product itself, generally will sit on a roof or on the ground, and once installed, you tend to forget that it's even there. There's not really many moving parts. The system the sun hits the panels produce electricity, and that electricity goes into the business to support you. The electricity that you don't manage to use, you can export back to the grid, who will pay you for that extra energy that you produce. So whatever you install, whatever it's producing, you will get some form of return on that energy.
Wow, that's really good that you get a good return on investment with that as
Absolutely,
well.
yeah. The typical returns on investment within solar will range from 3 to 7 years. If the project is starting to go outside of those timescales, you would maybe be questioning whether that was the right technology to install. But typically 3 to 7 years would be a good return on investment for installing solar panels.
Okay, well that's like quite a nice time frame as well. It's not too long and not too small as well.
Absolutely. When you think of a solar installation, typically will last for up to 30 years at the location and still perform to 85% of its power when it was installed, then you've got quite a long time with that technology to pay you back above the initial capital return.
What specific challenges do manufacturers face when considering solar solutions? And also, could you just describe how they could possibly overcome any challenges as well?
I think the initial challenges are, the first thing probably to look at is what energy you're using. So how many kilowatt hours does the business use per year? Then to sort of try and break that down into how that energy is used. Is there specific times of the day when you use more power? Is it at night? Is it during the day? Do you have the factory open 24 hours a day, or is it only on shifts, daytime and evenings? So analyse your own business first to get an idea of how you're using energy. The next challenge really is, do you have a roof or a location suitable to install the panels? And the objective really is to get as close to a south-facing roof as possible. So the optimum conditions to make the maximum amount of electricity from solar panels is to have them facing due south and ideally at an angle of 35 degrees.
Okay.
So it can be a challenge if you have a roof that's facing predominantly north, if you don't have much of a roof pitch, it may be that installing a solar system is not going to produce enough electricity to make the return on investment worthwhile. So working with a reputable company who can provide you with an initial desktop analysis, there's a lot of technology out there now where companies like my own can sit in the comfort of our own office and use tools and software to actually look on top of your building to see whether or not the building itself is suitable for an installation. And if not, what other solutions could we come up with? So if your roof isn't suitable, can we have a location on the ground and actually create an ideal scenario of 180 degrees due south with a 35-degree pitch? If we can't do that, a third option that's become more prevalent is looking at car parks. So we have a new product that we've launched to the market called the Carport, where you can actually create a roof over each car parking space, install solar panels and create some electricity from your car park.
Wow, that's quite nice because you'll also have a roof over your car as well.
It's quite cool, you know, and we've
Yeah.
got a lot of golf clubs, a lot of estates in particular that are looking at that technology, where you've got perhaps even an old factory that's listed. You might not be able to install anything on the roof, even if it was suitable for solar production. So it's really important that you work with a reputable company that can help you navigate that to that point where you can decide whether or not you think an installation would benefit your business.
Can you share some successful case studies where solar energy has made a significant impact for a manufacturing company?
Yeah, do you know, one that springs to mind straight away, a project that we've recently finished, a company called Food Options. To be honest, the food sector, and in particular the chilled and frozen food sector, can really benefit from solar installations. The reason why is they have a constant requirement for energy. So with freezers, with fridges running 24/7, 365 days a year, it means that whatever solar power you can produce, that business will use it all. So when we mentioned earlier about potentially exporting extra energy back to the grid, in the instances of food businesses, they tend to use all of it themselves and maximise the returns. So one business in particular we helped recently, a company called Food Options, based in Lewington, quite near Edinburgh Airport. And the client had actually come to the end of their energy contract. Their prices had gone from 13 pence a kilowatt to 44 pence a kilowatt, virtually overnight, and was putting real pressure on the livelihood of the business and their ability to continue. And the managing director, for the first time in his life, suddenly started looking at energy. Up until that point, he had just factored in 12 pence, 13 pence a kilowatt was okay. We don't really need to look at energy. We're fine for that. Suddenly, when your bill's going up by 300, 400%, it becomes, you know, quite polarising in the business. So we looked at the usage of the factory. We designed a system in line with how much electricity they used. And we installed a circa 150 kilowatt solar system to their factory roof. They're going to use all of that power, and that 150 kilowatt system, it will actually generate around 135,000 kilowatt hours of usable electricity. So if you think of that business no longer having to buy in that 135,000 kilowatts at 44 pence a kilowatt, the savings were almost £42,000 per year. The cost of the system was just over £100,000. So the payback was for that particular client. Now, what that's meant in a commercial sense, so what, you know, you've reduced your electricity bill, you've brought a little bit of savings into the company, but what it's meant to the business is they've stayed competitive. So they haven't had to, you know, accelerate the prices to their end clients by so much. They've managed to help a lot of clients who were struggling themselves. And they're now out there encouraging their clients to go on the same journey that they've been on by installing solar and other renewable measures to try and reduce their reliance on the grid. So probably a very strong case study, but certainly the food industry as a sector could really benefit from solar overall.
Okay. So if say I was a food manufacturer, what challenges would I face? I know you said if I had a north facing roof and everything. Say I didn't have a car park and I had a very small space around my factory. What would you suggest for me?
It's really a case of, in those rare instances where you don't have a roof, you don't have a car park, you don't have an alternative location, you really just have to work with what you've got. So even a small roof space can handle, you know, a decent system. For every sort of if you install a 4 kilowatt system onto a house, for example, it'll take up about 20 square meters. So you tend to find in most food production sites, they tend to have big facilities because they're making food, they're storing food, they're distributing food. So it's very, very rare that you would have a location for a food manufacturer or business that wouldn't have somewhere suitable to install. I haven't yet seen one that we couldn't do something with.
Okay, that's good to know then. So we're actually going to move on now to solar integration in manufacturing. So I'll start off with saying, what are the key factors that manufacturers should consider when integrating solar solutions in their operations? So grid and end-to-end process, things like that.
Yeah, I think the equipment itself is very reliable. I would always suggest that anybody installing solar would work with what's called Tier 1 products. And Tier 1 products mean that the manufacturer is, reputable, they're listed on the stock exchange, they make their own products, they have a fully automated factory. So it gives you some kind of guarantees that the system you're actually buying is going to last for the period of time that you hope. So it's the first thing probably is to consider, have I got a good supplier, as in a company like Nexus, to do my analysis, to give me that proposal that makes sense. You then look for sort of a company that's going to adopt the right technologies, the right equipment, and they can install them in a timely fashion. One of the challenges that every business faces is when you go above 10 kilowatts of system size and you want to export some of that back to the grid, you have to then fill in extra paperwork for the grid called a G99 application. Now, even if we filled that in day one of interacting with the client, it would take up to 12 weeks for the grid to analyse our design, to accept our design and give us permission to install the system. So the problem the client has is today, they want to save their electricity prices today. Unfortunately, by the time you go through the proposal, you design the system, you get the approval to install it, you arrange funding perhaps for the client, to fund the system, that whole time period can be up to 6 months. And sometimes that client would like the savings to be starting tomorrow morning. So I think probably setting expectations with the client as to what's actually involved in doing a solar project is really important from the outset.
Yeah, that is very important.
Yeah.
What types of solar panels are suitable for industrial use?
Most panels are suitable. We tend to work now, the industry has kind of two options, polycrystalline panels or monocrystalline panels. Now, over the last few years, it's been proven that monocrystalline is a more reliable technology. The amount of power that the panel produces, more of that is converted into usable electricity. And it means the monocrystalline means that the panel's been made from one continuous crystal of silicon, as opposed to fragments of silicon glued together. So using a monocrystalline panel would be something that we would always recommend. The next part of that is, you've generated electricity from the panel. You now need to turn it from what's called direct current into AC current, because your building doesn't use direct current, it uses AC current. So you have to choose what's called an inverter to translate that direct current electricity into AC current electricity. And depending on the product that you choose will determine how much of that is done and translated. So we would always recommend that you work with the best products that you can afford for the project that you have. If you're in a farm setting or you're close to the sea, there's certain panels that are called glass to glass. So the backing to the panel is more robust and it can handle the salt in the sea air. It can handle the ammonia that's on the farm. So it's quite important that, as an installation business, that you identify where you are, what kind of client you're dealing with, what are the surroundings that you're in. Is there anything that over time could degrade the products? And try our best to design a system that's suited for the location of the business.
You couldn't imagine anything worse than setting up your panel and it starts to degrade as time goes on.
Absolutely.
It would be terrible, wouldn't it?
We've installed systems that 14 years ago that we've gone back to just recently, and they've only sort of reduced the performance by 4%.
Wow.
So in nearly 14 years, we've only lost 4% of performance on those systems. So the technology is reliable for a long period of time, as opposed to other renewable technologies that perhaps might have a shorter shelf life.
Just going off that as well, how can manufacturers assess their energy needs and determine the right solar system size for their facility?
Yeah, I think that's important because you really want to match the size of the system and the energy production with the usage of the business. Now, in a lot of cases, you don't have a roof big enough to fit enough panels to satisfy all of the requirement, but you perhaps can satisfy half of the requirement from using all of the roof. In other instances, were you to fill the roof with solar panels, the business might only use half of that and therefore would be sending half of it back to the grid. Now, when you send electricity back to the grid, it's at a much reduced rate that they pay you. So they'll pay you anything from 4 pence a kilowatt to 15 pence a kilowatt for every bit of energy that you send back to the grid. But if you would have been paying 44 pence for that kilowatt, it's obviously a bigger saving if you can use the power yourself. So I think it's important that you try to match the size of the system you install with the power requirement of the client. And it's probably a really important step for the client to look out their energy bills, to actually get, 12 months of bills, look at how they're using power, when they're using power, and how much they're paying for it. Those are probably the most important steps to take.
Can you discuss the role of energy storage solutions in maximising the benefits for solar energy for the manufacturing industry?
Yeah, absolutely. Some factories run 24/7, 365 days a year, and they have, no drop in their energy requirement through that 24-hour period. So when installing the system, you know that power's going to be used. Conversely, if you're visiting a factory that closes at 5 o'clock every night, if you imagine in the summer months, it's light till 10:30 at night. The solar panels are producing power from 5 o'clock in the evening right up till 10:30, but you don't have a demand for that. So what are you going to do with that extra electricity? As we've mentioned before, you can send it back to the grid and sell it to them. But alternatively, what you can look at doing is perhaps adopting some battery storage. So it could be that you fit, either a small scale battery depending on your usage or a larger scale commercial system. And what that means, if you tie that in, especially with your tariff, where perhaps you have a tariff that has a cheaper night rate, it means that you can charge those batteries up during the day when you've got free solar energy. It means that you can charge them up at night using a cheaper tariff, and then you can reuse that power during the day when you have the requirement. The other thing that you can look at doing, and quite a lot of farms and dairy businesses, and they use a lot of hot water. And by diverting some of that electricity through an immersion switch into heating up the hot water, you're essentially using water as a battery, and you're storing the power into the water. So it's really, again, it all comes down to what is the business doing? How are they using power? How does the business operate? And how do you maximise the installation of a system to satisfy as much of that as possible?
Yeah, there seems to be so many ways that you could maximise it as well.
There really are. I mean, solar years ago, it was really the people, the early adopters of solar, did it because there was a lot of financial incentives to try and get people to start the technology off in the country. Those were called feed-in tariff schemes, and they disappeared probably about 4 or 5 years ago. But with the cost of energy now, increasing exponentially, and the fact that you can't control what happens with the energy costs, it's really reignited the market again for people to probably look at solar now in the right way, which is saving them money rather than just trying to make some money from an investment. So the market's really matured.
Yeah, it sounds like it really has. Are there any regulatory or financial incentives that manufacturers should be aware of when adopting solar? I know that you did mention that, they would get like a return on investment within 3 to 7 years. Are there any other financial incentives that they could be looking at possibly?
There are quite a few, depending where you are in the country. You really would probably be well advised to look at your local council website and look at the renewable section within there. For example, in Scotland, in the Highland region in Scotland, they have a really sort of sparse community, and they have very little access to grid facilities, etc. And in those instances, it's a lot more beneficial for those types of clients to be looking at different technologies to support their energy usage. And the councils that wrap around those houses are more inclined to give you free grants towards the installation of renewable systems. But it does vary very much from council to council. You'll find some councils give you no support, some councils give you lots of support. But it's always good advice to get the client to check out what their local council might do. Moving that up more to sort of national type campaigns, there are through Energy Savings Trust and Business Energy England, Business Energy Scotland, facilities where people can borrow money at very cheap rates towards renewable projects. I think for SMEs it's capped at £100,000, but a lot of that is interest-free lending. that you can access to. So if you're borrowing money for nothing, essentially, to put a system on your roof that's saving you money, it's kind of a no-brainer. What I would say is that with all government funding, there's quite a lot of paperwork to be completed. It can take a while for you to get that decision. And sometimes clients have been through a similar process and decide, we'll just fund it ourselves. It's quite painful going through that process. The other thing that's becoming more to the fore that I'm learning about myself is a thing called ESG. So in the world at the moment, ESG means environmental, social governance. And big corporates are now looking at how they run their business environmentally. So they're looking at their supply chains, and are the suppliers to our business ethical and environmentally friendly? They're looking at the social aspects of their business. So do they help the local community? Are they, making donations to local clubs? Are they trying to help the local community flourish? And the governance side is more about how is the board structured? How is your management team structured? Is there diversity within the company? Who are you hiring to, at senior level positions? And it's becoming more and more to the fore that lenders and people looking to sort of fund projects are more inclined to look favourably at renewable type installations than perhaps you borrowing money for something that isn't particularly environmentally friendly. And from what I can gather, over the landscape and business world over the next few years, ESG is going to become quite prevalent and people are going to know all about it. To give you a small example, a good friend of mine works with a major bank and he lends to renewable energy projects. And he has a fund of £250 million. And every time somebody borrows £1 million from it, the £1 million is filled back up again. Because there's no end of investors that want to put money into this type of project. It's useful for them with their ESG score. It's useful for the business, obviously, borrowing the money. So there are different funding options, different grant options, and overriding that is this ESG landscape that's coming more into play.
That's really handy for manufacturers to know as well about that ESG, because I've not really heard of that before as well.
Yeah, it's quite quiet at the moment, but definitely, your larger corporate companies are now looking at their supply chains. Again, looking at farming, if you're a supermarket, you're looking at your farmers that provide you with milk, with meat, vegetables. And how are they running their farm enterprise? Have they adopted any renewable technologies? How do they produce their milk? How's their carbon footprint looking? And if you look to the future, it may well be that some of these producers that haven't sort of moved with the times won't be able to sell their product. So that's the direct impact that some of these new world conditions that we're moving into will have on business.
I'm just going to jump to the next segment, which is overcoming challenges and concerns. So what common misconceptions or concerns do manufacturing businesses have about transitioning into solar energy?
Yeah, I think the first one that everybody says is, we live in the UK, the sun doesn't shine. Why would I install solar? And, it's a misconception. Solar requires daylight, not sunlight. The more powerful the sun is, the more direct the sun is to the panel, the more power it will produce. So as you go down the UK from the north of Scotland down to the south coast, systems will produce more the further south that you go because they get more direct sunlight, historically. The other thing is, does the technology work? Does it make a noise? Does it break down? Will I need a lot of maintenance? These are all the kind of questions that are in somebody's mind when they're thinking of installing for the first time. And out of all the renewable technologies, solar has so very few working parts. Once you install the system on the roof, the chances are, other than giving them a brief clean or the odd connection needing, looked at, the system will just really work away, for 30 years without you really needing to do anything. And it can become quite addictive for clients. They tend to look at the production meter that we install to see how much electricity they're actually producing. And they get quite obsessed with it.
I think I would as well.
A lot of clients now, we actually install monitors in the reception. And it tells their visitors, it tells their staff, it tells the management team what they're doing overall, that you as a business are not just trying to make money. You're trying to be sensible and responsible, about how you run that business too. So manufacturing in particular uses an awful lot of energy. Most products that are made in manufacturing, most food that's made in manufacturing needs a lot of energy to do so. And by installing technologies that, one, take away that massive reliance on the grid, on the prices that they charge you, it gives you the peace of mind, I guess, that, a lot of that power's actually been met by yourself now. And it can be quite, it gives you quite a bit of freedom in the business to know that you're kind of controlling that input cost to the company as well. But overall, I think the most misconceptions that people had were, does it actually work? Will it produce in this country? And now that we've got a solar industry that's about 15 years in maturity in the UK, most people that run a business, or they have a friend who's installed something at home, or they have another partner in another company that's done solar and is evangelising about it. So we don't tend to have too many barriers to entry on that side now within manufacturing, where there might have been 15 years ago.
Would you say that the aftercare is important as well, especially for like manufacturing companies? I know you said that it is a misconception that like something would go wrong, but is there an aftercare that companies can have?
Yeah, definitely. And we provide that as a service. So, for example, if you're installing a system and you're quite close to fields, you might get, from wheat, you might get some blow off that will maybe land just as a film on top of the panels. So it'd be prudent to just keep them clean. And, you don't need any special products. It's really just water, watering down the panels. We have software that we can fit now. So depending on the system the client's chosen, we have software and apps where we can actually sit in our office and we get alerts sent to us that panel number 6 and row number 4 isn't working properly. And we can go and visit the system, go directly to that panel. 9 times out of 10, there's a wee connection, maybe loose or something like that. Or perhaps the panel's just faulty and we can take that one out and put a new one in. So with them being on the roof, what you want to avoid is scaffolding and going up on the roof, constantly. And we tend to, when we will fit a system, we'll think about that, in the future, we might have to come back on this roof again. So we might ask the client, do they want us to fit an anchoring point on the roof? So that should they have to go up and do maintenance, or we have to, we can secure ourselves to that anchoring point in the future. And it takes away the need for scaffolding ongoing. So again, it all comes back to, the early discussion. What type of business are you? How are you going to use this power? What's around you? Are you a farm? Are you a factory? Is it a dirty site? Can I see other things around me that suggest that these panels might get dirty and might need more maintenance? And just sitting down with the client and explaining how that would work and what it would cost.
Are there any durability concerns as well? I know that we did touch on it, and you said that there hasn't really been any like major issues, especially with that one that you said that you installed 15 years ago. And what was it for? Like only like
3-4% reduction in its performance.
Wow. Has there been any other durability like considerations or any other success stories like that?
One of the very good things about solar panels, the manufacturers, and in particular tier 1 manufacturers, they're very confident in their product. Because there's not a lot of moving parts and it's quite simple technology, they will warranty the actual build of the product for up to 12 years typically. But they will provide a second warranty which warranties the performance of the panels. And most manufacturers will do that for up to 25 years, and some will even go up to 30 years. So at the very point that you're installing the system, the manufacturer is saying to you, we will warranty the performance of this system for the lifetime of it. So it gives you a lot of confidence that they believe in their own product, that you're going to be installing a system that's going to be successful. I think as well, the inverters, so you have the panels, you then have your inverter. Most of the manufacturers will offer you extended warranties. So the product, the as well. So of all the sort of renewable technologies, solar and the manufacturers of the products will stand behind their product and give you that sort of peace of mind that it will perform the way that they say it will for the duration of the project.
How does solar energy benefit the environment? And what role does sustainability play in the manufacturing sector?
Well, it benefits the environment because you're not having to burn fossil fuels, going into the atmosphere, and you're replacing that with a product that's been manufactured in a low carbon factory that doesn't really have any moving parts, that once installed just sits there and produces power for the duration of the product. And infinitely, it's a far cleaner way to produce energy than it is by burning, coal or oil or gas or something like that. So it genuinely is reducing our CO2 input into the atmosphere. It's allowing that company to drastically reduce, the damage that they might be causing to the local and the global atmosphere. The sustainability benefits that the company are going to have, one, financially, it brings in more financial control into one of the biggest input costs into the business. The second thing probably is it gives the business, going back to the ESG type thinking, it gives that business a bit of credence within the business world that it's a respectable employer, it's a respectable business that's trying to do the right things for the community, the environment.
Damaging the environment. So
Absolutely.
I completely agree with that.
There's some companies, unfortunately, just don't have an option, but they're trying, and it might be that installing a renewable technology isn't quite right for them. But what they can do is look at extra energy they may be using that they don't have to. The best form of renewable energy is don't use that energy in the first place. And I think another thing that adds to this sustainability is working with a company like Troo. So, don't use energy in the first place, produce some energy of your own. But the third thing is, what energy you have to buy in, pay as little amount for that energy as possible. And by working with companies like Troo, we're an energy broker, they're able to look forward in the market, to look at what's happening and to look, into the future for your business to secure a tariff that suits. And the other thing, so to marry that back to the renewable energy you're producing, it's also maybe a good time to look at your tariff, because the tariff market's changed quite a lot in the last few years. And there's a lot of tariff providers now who will give you different rates depending on the renewable energy that you've installed. So it's a moving picture. Renewables changes every day. There's new technologies come on the market. People become aware of more, their carbon footprint. They go on a journey. And we've really only scratched the tip of the iceberg. If you drive in any manufacturing industrial estate just now, you might see 2%, 8%, something like that, of the businesses in that industrial estate that have got any form of renewables. So it's quite an exciting time for the industry, for companies like ours. But it's also really satisfying to see a company that takes the decision to do something with a bit of trepidation, but then when they see the system installed and they just look at the energy coming in, they get really quite excited about the journey that they've taken as a company.
Yeah, of course. Can you discuss the potential for manufacturers to reduce their carbon footprint through solar solutions?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the key things when we, do an initial proposal and assessment for a client. We actually provide them with some calculations on the amount of flights that were going to be avoided, the amount of car journeys that would be equivalent to the carbon that's been saved from the solar installation. And you've got, 100 kilowatt systems saving up to 100 tons of CO2 per year for that company. And it's quite tangible, so as I say, at the point of presentation to the client, if we install this system at this business, here's how much of the energy that you're going to use. By doing so, this is the carbon that you're going to save. And by doing that, this is the benefit that's going to give to your business and to your clients. So it's, again, really an upfront sort of process for the client to understand that there are other benefits, not just money. There's other things that you're doing, but predominantly CO2 would be the thing that people would look at as a sort of initial tangible saving.
Are there any certification or sustainability standards that manufacturers should aim when adopting solar energy?
I think when they work with the industry, if you're installing systems up to 50 kilowatts in size, you should always go with somebody who is a micro generation certification scheme member or MCS, as they call it for short. You should really always look at companies that perhaps work to ISO standards, so they've got their own qualitative measures within their business that means that they'll do the job to a certain standard. And I think, from a manufacturer's point of view, being able to sort of go back to, your peers in the industry to say that your carbon footprint is reduced from X to Y, is a major benefit. I don't think, other than perhaps cheaper lending and other things coming down the track, at the moment there isn't so much of a reward for you as a business. So you've installed solar panels and a wind turbine and an air source heat pump. Here's £100,000 for doing that. Thank you very much. It doesn't tend to work like that at the moment, but perhaps in the future it might. But I think the picture does change all the time, and it may be that the government look to incentivise businesses in other ways, or conversely, they might punish them in other ways for not doing it.
How can integrating solar solutions assist manufacturers meet their net zero targets?
Well, one of the biggest creations of carbon is energy. And by looking at, first of all, and understanding your energy usage in your business, how much do you use and when do you use it? And then by installing a renewable system, you're essentially taking away that fossil fuel element that you're pulling to the business. So if you're a factory and you're making cars, and they're fuel cars, so you've got a double whammy there. You're using fossil fuel energy to make a product that's going to fill itself up with fossil fuel and burn it. You're kind of limited. That's your product and that's what you make. But by putting some renewables in, it instantly attacks the whole picture within that factory, and means that what you're doing is everything that you can. Before, people are now moving obviously towards EV vehicles. We have hydrogen, down the track that looks like it could be quite an attractive technology too. But while you're still involved in old-scale manufacturing, making products that still rely on fossil fuels, you're limited to what you can do with your production. But what you can do is change the power element of how that's made by installing renewables.
Moving on to the future of solar solutions in manufacturing, what would you envision as the future for solar solutions in the manufacturing sector?
I have a vision, or maybe it's a prayer, I'm not sure which one, but that every manufacturing business in the UK should have some form of solar element attached to it. What I think might happen in the future is maybe people working together. So, for example, if you have a massive factory with a huge roof that's suitable for a solar installation, but not a massive amount of power requirement, perhaps other buildings that are close by that don't have a suitable roof, that can't install the system that they need, could work with the roof and the customer that does. I haven't really seen much of that type of working just now, but it makes sense that could be something in the future.
Definitely does.
I think another thing that we're seeing quite a prevalence in is ground-mounted solar systems. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. A lot of the land that's being used for these solar installations is good farming agricultural land that's essentially been taken out of production. So I would like to see a future where we focus first of all on what you would probably call brownfield sites. So what roofs can we use? What roofs can we utilise? What help can we give, those ideal roofs to be able to install? Target the funding at the best areas first of all to give the maximum saving. So really, I think pretty much the manufacturing sector, I'd love to see everybody being aware of the technology. I'd love to see some kind of government funding to help that industry understand overall what they could be doing, and then to point some finance and funding to help them on their journey to make these installations more achievable, really.
And are there any emerging technologies or trends that manufacturers should keep an eye on?
Yeah, I think battery technology is improving all the time. It used to be that if you installed a battery, you needed, a car park itself just for the size of the battery. We've seen a lot of the battery manufacturers now, their products being condensed into much smaller units. So I think battery technology is going to become a lot cheaper, a lot more accessible. Again, if you are thinking of doing something with things like batteries, always speak to your tariff provider. If they're able to create a bigger difference between your daytime kilowatt per hour price and your nighttime kilowatt per hour price, it could be that charging a battery up overnight and using the electricity during the day can transform the cost of your business. So I think things like that are to be watched for. I do think hydrogen seems to be gathering some momentum. And in some cases, things like, for example, farmers being able to host, solar panels that produce hydrogen that then companies can buy from them to use in their businesses.
Yeah.
I think that could be a model that comes to the fore over the next few years as well. And we've now got panels that are, they're looking at efficiencies of up to 35%, where they've improved the cell structure of the panel. So in theory, it can almost produce twice as much power as what's available today.
Wow.
So the market's always changing. 14 years ago, the biggest panel we installed was 250 watts.
Okay.
Now we can get panels that are nearly 600 watts.
Wow.
So,
That's different.
smaller roofs that don't have as much space, by fitting a bigger panel, you're able to create more power in a smaller area. So things like that, it's my job and it's our job as a business to keep abreast of all those changes and to incorporate them into our offering that we've got for our clients. But I do think there's some really exciting changes just on the horizon.
Yeah, it is. It's very exciting stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
How can solar companies and manufacturers work together to drive innovation and sustainability in the industry?
Yeah, I think to be fair, the industry's not massive in the UK compared to others. And most of the companies and the individuals working within the sector, we do meet quite regularly at events and shows and share information, share technologies, share projects.
Yeah.
So there is quite an open source kind of environment within solar between the various different companies.
Yeah.
I do think that there's perhaps, how would you put it, maybe companies coming together. So you've got a lot of smaller businesses just now. There seems to be a bit of a change going on where some of those smaller companies are joining together to form bigger companies. So I do think in the future we might have bigger companies doing solar installations and less of them, but working in a more collegiate way between each other.
Yeah.
For example, we have an office in Glasgow, but we also have an office in Grantham. But sometimes we might have a project in Wales, and somebody that we've got a good relationship with as an installer is our carbon footprint.
Yeah.
If we're able to work with more local installers that are based near to where the project is, we don't have to send, our staff all the way around the country to do the project. So I do think there's a lot of different things that we can work together on to help each other's businesses be more successful, but also to reduce our own carbon footprint as installers of the technology.
Yeah, that is actually, I didn't even really think about that side of it, where yous will always have to want to reduce your carbon footprint as well.
We absolutely do. Some of the tools and equipment that we can use, we adopt everything that we're able to online. All of our software systems talk to Google Earth Pro. We've got great ability to sit on a desktop. I think COVID's maybe accelerated a lot of those technologies and a lot of those abilities. Yeah. But genuinely, without even visiting a client site, we can probably get to about 90% of all the calculations. Yeah. Allows the client to see whether it's viable or even suitable for them to do it before we start clocking up any miles to visit clients.
Just to conclude then, I just want to say thank you so much for coming in. It's been an absolute pleasure having you, David.
Thanks very much. Yeah.
And thank you to all our listeners as well for joining in. And I think basically what we've highlighted today is the importance of adopting renewable energy for the manufacturers and aiming to achieve their net zero targets, really. Yeah. It sounds like there's a lot of exciting things happening as well in the solar industry as well.
There are, definitely.
I feel like we've gained a lot of insight into this now. Thank you, David.
Great, my pleasure.
For more information on energy solutions in the manufacturing sector, feel free to contact us, Troo, via the link in the description. And stay tuned for more podcasts on business energy. And if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes that we have for you. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll see you soon.